Okay. You think you've waited long enough for everyone?
Yeah, I think we'll give everybody enough time that we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Mr. Overstreet asked me to present on suicide awareness, suicide prevention for all of you.
Okay.
Everywhere in suicides and calls to suicide hotlines, and just in just mental health issues in general. So we wanted to go over some facts and figures about suicide, including some risk factors, situational clues and behavioral clues that's important to be aware of. And then we'll just have a little discussion and talk about some of the things that I presented. But this is going to kind of keep me on track so that I can give you guys a good overview of the seriousness of the suicide situation that we're facing, and then we'll talk afterward. Okay. That doesn't mean you can't stop me during the presentation and ask me questions. So let me know if you have something you want to expand on. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's see if we can get this going with my technological genius here. Okay. All right. Some of the learning objectives I would like to for you to receive are some data, like I said, facts versus myths, some warning signs and risk factors, basic intervention skills to use, because as we know, often people just want someone to talk to. And it's not so much a matter of what you say to them. Sometimes they just need someone to listen to them. So those are some really basic things that anyone can do. You don't have to be a mental health professional or have any particular skills or knowledge. And then some resources for help that we'll share with you at the end. Okay, so some statistics. Approximately 117 people die by suicide every day in the U.S. In Tennessee, suicide is the 9th leading cause of death. I'm sorry, suicide is the 9th leading cause of death for all ages, but in Tennessee. But it's also, okay, I got ahead of myself, sorry. The 9th leading cause of death for all ages, and that includes, including children. So these are the number of suicides, Americans who died by suicide in 2017, which is 47,173. And the statistics are a little bit old, but I don't have any more recent ones. But you can see by now, with the way things are, that number is quite a bit higher. Suicide deaths are much more common than homicides, 2.4 times the number. 10th leading cause of death across the lifespan, and it's the 2nd leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 34. We know that males die by suicide much more frequently than females. But did you know that a lot of times females are have more suicidal ideations, or what we call suicidal thoughts, and they express the desire to commit suicide more frequently, but males complete suicide much more frequently than females. We also have over 6,000 veterans who die by suicide each year. Suicides have exceeded motor vehicle crash related deaths as well for over 10 years. Okay, so since suicide is the 9th leading cause of death for all ages, each year, we know that 1 in 5 adults will experience a mental illness, and only 1 in 3 will actually receive treatment. Here are some statistics at the bottom. 2009 up until 2017. As you can see, it's just steadily increasing. So for each documented death we have by suicide, there have been at least 25 suicide attempts, is what the data shows. We also have knowledge that at least 5%, and I think this is much higher personally, but at least 5% of working age adults have had thoughts of suicide in the past year. 90% of people or more who die by suicide have communicated their intention. And 60% of us either know or will know someone who dies by suicide. At this point, you know, if we were in person, I would ask for a show of hands of how many of you know someone who has committed suicide, but we can't do that at this time. So if you'll remind me at the end, I'd like to know how many of you actually do know someone. And also 20% of us either have had or will have a family member die by suicide. The alarming statistics, isn't it?
Very much so.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, here's some myths versus facts. You've probably all seen these before, but it doesn't hurt just to kind of go over them. No one can stop a suicide. Well, that's a myth, correct? If people can get help they need, someone to listen to them and show that they care and that they want them to live. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase risk. It's another myth. If you ask someone directly about suicide, it lowers their fear and it opens up communication, which actually lowers the risk of an impulsive act. Suicidal people keep their plans to themselves. Another myth. Most people communicate their intent either during the week before or directly before, either indirectly or directly. We know that once a person decides to die by suicide, there's always something that can be done, or I won't say always, I'm sorry, I'll say most of the time, there's something that can be done. So it's a myth that there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. It is the most preventable kind of death. And those who talk about suicide don't do it is another myth. Often they're just searching for a reason not to do it. So risk factors. I'm going to talk a little bit about some risk factors that may or may not lead to suicide. We know that the more risk factors a person has, the greater their potential is for actually attempting or committing suicide. Some of them are family risk factors. Anyone know what some family risk factors might be?
Previous members of the family committed suicide?
Yes. Someone in their family that has committed suicide is a risk factor. What about just family support?
Yes, absolutely.
Someone who has family support is much less at risk than someone who has no family support or who feels very isolated. Personal and behavioral risk factors. Can anyone tell me what a personal or behavioral risk factor, like, can you name one?
alcohol or drug use?
Yes, absolutely. Substance, drug, alcohol use is a huge risk factor, as well as someone who's relapsing. And any kind of behavioral diagnosis, mental health diagnosis, things like depression, some manic depression, things like that, they're also huge risk factors. Some environmental and social risk factors might include what?
How about like internet bully culture?
Internet what, sir?
Internet bully culture.
Yes, that's one. What about something like someone who's socially very isolated and doesn't have any friends or any family near them that they can, for social support? Other social risk factors might be something like someone who was just fired from a job, or they just they're in a relationship, or they just had a loss of a major relationship. Could be a divorce. It could be a friendship, something like that. It also could be something like the loss of a close family member, someone who passed. So financial security, things like that, loss of financial security. Or it could be even a medical type thing that they've decided that they don't want to, they fear becoming a burden to someone in their family. Those are all risk factors that we need to be aware of with people around us, and also with ourselves, that whenever we have some of these risk factors, we're a lot more likely to feel hopeless and consider taking our life. Okay, here's a list of some. You guys did really well. Some family ones: family history of suicide, mental illness, substance abuse, personal, loss, death, abandonment, divorce. And the social, of course, can have to do with anything from feeling neglected, some abusive parenting, sexual orientation issues. Trying to get that to go up a little bit, but it wouldn't. Let me hide this there and see if that'll show. Okay, and repeated loss are all. Some triggers that are on the right-hand column will help you to see how some of those things kind of manifest, including family conflict, anniversaries of deaths, things like that have to do with family, personal rejection, and then those mental health diagnoses, things like severe stress, anxiety, things like that, and there's substance use on there. And with social, we've got bullying, harassment, arrest, anything like that might contribute to the risk. Okay, when is risk the highest? It's very important. If someone has been hospitalized in a psychiatric facility within 30 days of discharge, their risk goes up. Other risk factors: someone who's in chronic pain, someone who feels profound hopelessness or helplessness. Once again, alcohol or drug use, depression, and isolation. Some other ones are any kind of triggering event, like I mentioned earlier. It could be loss of job, loss of a relationship, anything like that. A new diagnosis of like a terminal illness or some type of long-term illness. Access to a gun or means of harm. Feeling like a burden. And we often see a sudden improvement in mood from individuals who have decided that they want to commit suicide. Does everyone know why that is?
They're no. Oh, sorry. They're conflicted with the decisions that they're trying, they've made their decision, so they're no longer conflicted of how to fix anything.
Exactly. They know that soon their pain will be over. Once they decided that that's what they're going to do, and they no longer have to worry about living with that pain any longer. Okay, some high-risk populations. These are people that typically have multiple risk factors, and this has just been, this is data that's been accumulated over many, many years from statistics on suicide, that American Indians and Alaska Natives are a high-risk population, survivors of suicide. Once again, we mentioned that, veterans, active military, LGBT youth, individuals that have mental health or substance use disorders, people who've attempted before are more likely to complete suicide, and also youth that are in justice and child welfare settings. 20% of our U.S. suicides are veterans, and some of the factors that increase risk that are listed there, including their age, severity of their wounds and their pain, physical assault or sexual assault while in the military, and most importantly, active substance abuse is a huge risk factor. And it's also heightened by PTSD and traumatic brain injury and depression, as well as pre-existing conditions. Also, female veterans that are between the age of 18 and 34 die by suicide 6 times more than females that are non-veterans. That's an old statistic too, but it's significant. Going too fast, or is it good?
No, it's good.
Okay.
I was wondering.
So some protective factors. And so this is very important. Protective factors are characteristics that reduce the likelihood that someone may attempt or complete suicide. So these are those skills, those strengths, resources that help people deal with stress and also with whatever's creating the distress in their life. It enhances their resilience and makes them able to counterbalance those risk factors. So it can be considered personal protective factors, or what we call the internal risk internal protective factors, or they can be external, what we call environmental. So some of those that we have, such as social skills, being able to problem solve, and being able to control our anger, those are considered personal protective factors. Also, strong connections to family members. We talked about support systems earlier. Good support system is a great protective factor. Being optimistic or having hope for the future. Have good impulse control and a self-esteem or self-worth. And also having hope, reasons for living, coping skills. One of the biggest factors in just people being able to get over any type of mental illness or substance abuse disorder is having that resiliency to cope with whatever comes along. If you're not resilient and you just fall apart every time something bad happens to you, then you're not going to do well in life. But if you're resilient and you're able to overcome all those obstacles that we all face in life, then you're going to have a lot better chance of being successful and not having any thoughts of suicide. Some external factors would be good health, having insurance and access to any mental or physical health care you may need. Also being medically compliant, taking care of your health and wellness, strong relationships, any opportunities to contribute, whether you get involved with in your job, in your work, or in your community, and other activities, social activities that make you feel like you're a part of something. And also restricted access to lethal means. Someone who doesn't have access to a weapon is less likely, or access to other lethal means is less likely to commit suicide. Just looking for a statistic that I had about ways that people commit suicide, and I want to say that about 60%, I believe, I don't know if anyone knows if this is right, but I believe about 60% of individuals do use a firearm. And then, of course, if you have a substance use problem, consistent involvement in some of those support groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous are also good protective factors. Okay, so know the warning signs for yourself and for others around you. Look for signs of depression, which include feeling powerless, hopeless, helpless, or worthless. Just a sad demeanor with being withdrawn. We look for behavioral signs if someone's giving away their possessions, if they're acquiring a weapon or stockpiling pills, or even just putting their personal affairs in order. In work performance, you look for individuals seeming distracted, not really being engaged in their work. They may become erratic and just do things that are out of character. Missing a lot of work, or just sudden change in work circumstances that could include a demotion, being written up, things like that, or any serious or embarrassing work-related events that might put someone in a really bad, put them at high risk. Okay, here's some things that you might notice someone that might they might speak about, or might give you clues about warning that they're feeling suicidal. If they talk about failure, call themselves a loser, or talk about the fact that they can't do anything right, they're never going to amount to anything, things like that, saying they don't belong. Maybe a loss of ability to relate to peers and family, you might notice. They stop talking to you when they previously were more social, don't seem to want to engage anymore, become withdrawn, as we say. Someone who has an anticipated loss of financial security, maybe their job is on the line. A history of any suicidal behavior, and any thoughts or expressions of feeling like a burden. They may say their family's better off without them. Burnout, unexplained fatigue. We see this a lot in corrections. People get burnout easily because the job is just so difficult. Dwelling on problems, drug or alcohol abuse. What about some direct or indirect verbal statements? Well, we'll get through this and we'll talk about those. Remind me, Robert, some direct and indirect verbal statements I want to go over with you all. Some reckless behavior. If someone is doing things that could get them fired or could get them arrested, like, they start driving while intoxicated and doing things like that, that's a sign. And then being preoccupied with death. That would look like making statements like, about wanting to, what it might be like to die, or even like looking up different things about death on the internet, things like that. And also unexplained anger or aggression is a warning sign. Okay, here's some indirect statements. I forgot these were on here, sorry. You can read those, some things like, I'm just tired, I can't go on. Nobody would care if I wasn't around anymore. Can you think of any others that might be an indirect statement someone would make?
Um, feeling unloved.
Huh?
We hear a lot of things in the prison system about people not feeling, or people feeling unloved. Nobody loves them, cares about them, things like that.
Yeah, nobody cares about me, or I just want out, I need an out, that kind of thing. Pretty soon you won't have to worry about me. That's a pretty common one. You won't have
Yeah.
to worry about me any longer. And then some direct statements might be, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to end it all. I'm going to eat my gun. I think that's one that the police or the law enforcement use a lot. Okay, starting the conversation. Here's where we get to how we can help. If someone seems to be showing any of these signs or these clues or risk factors are starting to be evident, ask them if they have time to talk. How you ask them is often less important than whether you ask or not. Listen to their problem, pay full attention to them. Often you will have to find a private place because most people are not going to talk where someone else can hear them, right? So get them aside by themselves to a private place and just ask the question. If they're reluctant, be persistent. Ask them. If you can't ask the question, if you're afraid, then find someone who can. Because, like I said, it's more important that you do ask than that you do ask the question than how you ask the question. Some people just really can't come out and ask someone if they're thinking about killing themselves. It's hard to do, really is. But if you express your concern and mention that you've noticed the changes in their behavior and something they've said, most people will talk to you. Reinforce that you care about them. You might say, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to hurt yourself. If they're showing signs, or if they've said something like one of those direct statements about that you won't have to worry about me, let them know. You can say, when people you don't have to actually come out and say, hey, are you thinking about killing yourself? You can say something like, when people are as upset as you seem, they sometimes wish they were dead. I'm wondering if you're feeling that way. That's an easier way than just coming right out and saying, are you thinking about killing yourself?
Right.
And remember, communicate that attitude of that you care. You don't want to say things like, you're not thinking about killing yourself, are you? Because that doesn't communicate an attitude that you really care. That communicates an attitude that you're frustrated with them. So remember that, raise it in a way that feels comfortable, but be persistent and be genuine. Show them that you care about them. And then just allow them to talk freely. Okay? Remember, suicide, that the actual suicide is not the problem. The problem is that is their perceived solution to the problem, to whatever's going on with them. They think that's the only solution. Okay, so here's how not to ask the question. You're not suicidal, are you? You're not thinking doing something stupid, are you? Well, I know you can't be suicidal, right? Those are the kind of things that you don't want to say. Do be yourself. Once again, validate their feelings, provide your full attention, and let them share their story. Be empathic, it should say, non-judgmental, accepting. Even if they say something you think doesn't make any sense and they're being dramatic, just try to be accepting of it and not argue with them. Let them know they did the right thing by sharing, and just be willing to listen. Instill hope. If you reassure them that there is help and you're willing to help them, that these feelings are temporary. It's not. There are other things they can do. Suicide's not the solution. Says do not be too hopeful, because you don't want to seem superficial or seem like that you're minimizing what's going on with them or minimizing how upset they are. So you want to be reassuring, but don't be like, super positive that would indicate that you don't take the feelings seriously, or you don't think their problem's as bad as they think it is. And then use language like, I believe that, if you work through this with a professional, you can figure it out, and I want you to live, and we can find someone that can help you. Do not act shocked or tell them that suicide's wrong, that they're gonna go to hell or anything like that, because some people feel very, very seriously about suicide being wrong, and that it's someone might say that thinking that it's going to scare them, but that's not the right thing to say. It's better to just talk about how they can get some help and how you can help them to find those resources. They don't need lectures on the value of life or how much they have to live for. They don't need those kind of statements. It's not gonna be helpful. Let them know that what they tell you is confidential, and basically that that you care about them. That's all, really. Like I said before, just your willingness to listen and help them can rekindle their hope and save a life. Okay, so connecting, keeping the person talking, let them know you care. We've already went over that. Do not leave them alone if suicide is an immediate concern. If the person has a means and they've already stated that they do want to commit suicide, it's really important that you don't leave them alone. If you need to take them to the hospital, or make sure that a friend or family member stays with them until they can agree to get some help, that's very important. I know none of us can prevent suicide completely. If someone's made up their mind, we can't stay with them 24/7. But if it's an immediate concern, probably hard not to leave them alone or let them go home alone. If you're at work, contact your immediate supervisor, get someone else involved, or you can get someone involved out in the community if you have access to. If you can get them to go along with you and get access either to a community mental health center or to an emergency room. Here's some options. There's a national suicide prevention lifeline. That's 1-800-273-TALK. If they're not in immediate danger and they just need to talk to a professional, then you can offer to dial that for them or give them the number. If there's no, like I said, if there's no immediate danger, this is something you can write down now. You can Google it. It's a national hotline, so it's very well. I mean, it's kind of all over the place. Anytime you look up anything about suicide prevention. We have mobile crisis in Tennessee that we use a lot for our facilities, and I know that other law enforcement agencies use it. But anyone can call mobile crisis if they have a situation where they can't get a person to go into the hospital and they're worried about that. They can also call to have someone come out to the house and evaluate them. And then, of course, there's 911. That's for for very serious situations, as you know. Those are for Tennessee employees, state employees. I wanted to also let you know there's a text line. If you look on the right-hand side in the middle, some people don't like to talk when they're very emotional and upset, so they can also text TN to 741-741 and actually have a conversation with a mental health professional or someone who's trained in crisis without having to actually talk. And we know that a lot of our younger generation, they prefer texting to talking. So that's why that was started just 2 or 3 years ago. And we have all these resources if any of you guys need more. If you didn't get a chance or if you need more information on them, then just let Robert know and I'm happy to provide those for you. Get out of this, back to my screen. Okay, so comments, questions?
Hey, Sherlean, it's Daryl.
Hey, Daryl.
I just wanted to let you know that crisis hotline. I recently had a friend, acquaintance,
Right.
that contacted me that said that they were, thinking about killing themselves, and I gave them that number. I called out to them, and they got the help that they needed right away. So I just want to let you know that number actually does, have some support there, and it did work in that case. So
Thank you for letting me know, Daryl. That's great. I'm glad he was able to get the help he needed. I unfortunately had a friend actually in October, just last month, that committed suicide, and she didn't use any of the options or resources that she had.
well, her husband had actually reached out to me because he knew that I had done some of this kind of work and was familiar with it, and he knew that as soon as he heard something from her that was, kind of negative in talk, that he reached out to me and said, "Hey, who can I call? Who can I get a hold of to get her some help?" So
that's great.
And one thing that I think is during this current situation with the pandemic, and so many people spending so much time at home and it's not as much time socializing, that we're going to see people that have never had to deal with a suicidal family member experience this and not know what to do. And
absolutely.
So, and as educators, that's something that we need to make sure that we're keeping an eye on, because our students may be having this feeling, someone they know may be having their feeling, someone in our own house may be having that feeling. So, when it's with this pandemic, everything is so hyped up as far as mental health, drug abuse, and domestic violence, that everybody's world has changed just by being isolated.
Absolutely. I just saw there was some I think there's some talk here. What's going on with that? Anybody have any questions? I was looking in the chat. No?
I wanted to just maybe touch on one topic. You mentioned, obviously substance abuse, alcohol abuse is obviously a big corollary between that and suicide and accidental overdose and even purposeful overdose. As we see, we're starting to see the trend nationally of a decriminalization of drugs, and some states are even moving to decriminalize all drugs. Obviously, they removed a lot of the legal problems that are associated with drug prohibition, but it does very little to quell the psychological, physical, emotional, and spiritual component that make drugs devastating, that brought upon those legal maneuvers in the first place. What are the ideas about the impact of that on suicide nationally, as we kind of start to see potentially the use of drugs, or at least the availability of drugs, go up?
Your question is, how is that impacting suicide?
Well, yeah. What kind of projections can we make? I mean, if we can expect to see maybe not the use of drugs go up, but the availability of drugs, just as they become more socially acceptable, we remove taboos associated with their use. Obviously, heroin and methamphetamine are still, physically addictive substances that cause a hardship on the person's psyche.
Yes.
What are some of our ideas about that?
I haven't heard a lot about that. Now, I definitely am not an expert on substance abuse at all. I'm more of a mental health 101 kind of person. But that's something that's definitely, I think, going to impact the rate of suicide, because anytime that you take something that's as powerful as the drug and alcohol, the substance abuse period has been on just causing people to have more mental health issues, more problems in life, more distress. I think that legalizing drugs can only increase the problem, is my opinion.
I tend to agree. I think the real thing here is obviously the legality of drugs. It does create people that choose to use drugs that are illegal. Obviously, they have one more problem associated with the use of that drug, but it doesn't. I still don't think that trumps. And like I said, I'm kind of a novice in this too. The whole idea that the hardship caused by the actual addiction and the actual psychological dependence on the substance, just in my mind, seems to be the reason people are dying purposely under these drugs. The legality may be a small portion of it, but just the fact that the woe and misery that comes from being a heroin addict, I think it weighs a lot heavier than any legal things that are associated with it.
Oh yeah, and it also creates other problems, socially, not only legally, but socially. It creates problems financially a lot of times, and with it just I think the ramifications go into like almost every area of life when someone starts abusing substances.
No doubt, no doubt. Thank you for this information. It's been very, very intriguing, very thought provoking. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that's about everything that I wanted to cover. I was trying to remember if there was anything else, Robert, but one thing that I just wanted to say is, just be very aware of your own beliefs about suicide, so that when you do encounter a situation where you can be of assistance to someone, that you can just be objective and try to look at their risk factors, look at their the clues or the cues, whatever you want to call them, that are evident, and just reach out and try to help them, and not be judgmental. It's easy to be judgmental about individuals, whether it's because they're abusing substances or because they're just overly dramatic, or maybe they're you don't really perceive, your perception of their problem isn't the same as what theirs is. So just kind of be aware of your own beliefs and try to set those aside whenever you encounter someone who may be displaying some of these obvious behavioral or situational clues to you, and just try to help them out. If you can't, like I said before, if you can't ask or you can't do that, try to find somebody else who can do that. It's not easy.
Right. Not at all.
Sherlean, if I could add just one thing.
Absolutely.
In the situation that I mentioned earlier, they reached out to me, or I should say, she did, because she knew me, she trusted me. Had they not reached out to me, I don't know that they would have reached out to anyone else. So if someone, and I just want to share this, if someone does reach out to you and makes one of those statements, you got to take action. You got to understand that that may be the only warning sign or the only person that they reach out to that may pick up on that. So you definitely have to act on that.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
And
you know,
if you can't find someone who will.
right.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely. And just I think by piggybacking off of what you said and what she said earlier, tell someone else. You don't have to do this alone. If you don't know what to do, reach out to somebody else. Any instructor, anybody that you can trust to help you with this. Just reach out to them and be like, hey, this is an issue. We need to deal with it. This person needs help. So.
I have a perfect example of that. I went to our facility in Only, Tennessee yesterday, Attorney Center, to talk to 2 officers who responded to an overdose. And the person the inmate actually died, and they brought him back with Narcan. But
Yeah.
when it happened, and when the cellmate alerted the officers to what was going on, that the first officer in the pod that responded, she couldn't deal with it. She saw, the signs. The person was obviously, the fingers, the color of the were white, and the person was making those sounds, that someone makes when they're starting to I don't know how to describe it, but
Aspirates.
yeah, and foaming at the mouth and all that. She couldn't handle it, so she left, and she went out and called a code, and then went and started trying to lock down the pod. Well, fortunately, the other officer from another pod that heard the code got there in like 45 seconds and knew to put ice under the person's armpits and to do some other things until medical got there to administer the Narcan. But the person actually that was there first, she couldn't handle it, and that's okay. Not all of us are equipped to handle a crisis or to deal with someone who's suicidal. I mean, it's a scary thing, but if you can handle it, or if you know someone that is dealing with that situation, that has a family member or a friend that's suicidal, just tell them, you know what, it's okay if you can't, but find someone who can do it. Like you said, you've got to respond, because you may only have that one chance. So that first officer couldn't do it, but fortunately there was somebody else who could manage it.
Right.
So
Great example. And we had one of our own students use the Narcan and save their neighbor's life about a month ago through the Narcan training that we offered them. And when you're dealing with something like that, something that we haven't talked about, but we'll hit on real quick, is when you do deal with trauma of that sort, it's important to talk to someone about it afterwards and debrief. So
absolutely, it is, because there can be prolonged stress on you, or what they call the residual stress after dealing with something like that. So you do need to debrief with somebody else and talk through it. Just process how it made you feel, and talk to someone about just how upsetting it was, or in detail what happened, and help your brain process it. Good point, Robert. You little budding psychotherapist.
And one of the last things I want to discuss real quick, and we'll end the meeting, but during this crisis, family domestic violence. There's more people at home with family members that are abusive and things of that nature. If somebody in that situation reaches out for help as well, do something. One reason that this was so important to me personally, and I think it's important for everybody for their own reason, but a friend of mine overdosed on June 1st, and then October 18th, his daughter was murdered by her boyfriend in domestic violence. And, so that family has had 2 deaths within a few months of very horrible situations. and both of them can be related to the current pandemic environment. So that, to me, this is an important conversation to have, just so that everybody's aware of possibilities and know if somebody reaches out to you, do something to help.
Yep, do something to help or call someone who can help, because it only takes a few seconds to lose a life.
Absolutely. So if go ahead, Ms. Shirley.
I was going to say, I really appreciate all of you all signing on and talking about this, because, we all have the potential to save lives and to help others. So I think it's important that I think it's really commendable that you took an hour out of your day to talk about it.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming. If anybody has any questions about anything that we sent out, shoot me an email. We'll have a one-on-one conversation. If we need to set up time to talk to Ms. Sherlean one-on-one, we can do that as well. To answer any questions you may not have wanted to ask in the open forum. That's something that, me, Daryl, and Ms. Sherlean have kind of worked together in other environments. That's something that we've always offered, is after the class is over with, if you have questions you don't want to ask, with the group, let us know and we'll get them answered after the meeting. Daryl, Ms. Sherlean. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Sherlean.
I just said absolutely. Let me know if you need any help or if any situations come up and we need to talk about it.
All right, and we'll get those together. And thanks everybody for coming, and we'll call this a meeting. And everybody have a good holiday if I don't see between now and Thanksgiving. Hope everybody gets to spend some time with family in whatever fashion you're doing this year. See your loved ones. So, Ms. Sherlean, Daryl, thank y'all so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
day,
Sherlean.
everyone.
All right, see you, Robert. Thank you, Sherlean.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You
Thanks,
too.
guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.